Structurally, this episode is not as impressive as the last one, especially when it comes to reflecting themes so thoroughly in everything. It's got some, again, not story-killing, but certainly awkward plot moments, and I had far more problems with the dialogue being odd or inconsistent. But it is the first episode in the live action to dive into some deeper subject matter, and it also had more than one of some of the best emotional moments in the whole season. One that I think was so good, it might actually hold up completely on its own and out of context. Hey, this is the Sword and the Pen Reflections. It is my casual alternative to that channel. If you're here, you know the deal. I don't need to explain. We're looking at Netflix's live-action adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender, Season 1, Episode 4, titled Into the Dark. And this is a good title because it encapsulates the theme for this episode. You will have to have seen the live-action episode in order to understand anything that I'm talking about, especially since I'm going to be just brushing over the dialogue and the different scenes that happen and just mainly focus on my comments regarding what was different from the animation, what was changed for the better or changed for the worse. And then a little bit of discussion about why I came to the conclusion that some of these things were either better or worse. Also, if you want to jump ahead, I have sectioned this whole video out into chapters, so you can jump to whatever interests you the most. Go ahead and do that. Otherwise, I do speak slower than most YouTubers do, so feel free to watch this at 1.5 to 2 times speed. That's it, we're just gonna jump right on in, but before we do, please like, subscribe, and comment, even if it's just with an emoji. That's free for you, and for me, it won't really help me make much money, because these videos don't really make money, but it will boost me in the algorithm, which is good. Maybe I will start making more money from them, but if you've got the means and you're feeling generous, you could check out my Patreon, Ko-fi, or hit the money heart thanks button down below. You can become a subscriber, you can leave me a one-time tip, even just for $1, I appreciate anything. That's it, let's go. Yes, I'm reading everything off my laptop because I'm trying to be quick through these, because I gotta get these videos out before the second season comes out. Episodes from the animation that are covered in this live-action episode. There's a lot. The King of Omashu, obviously. Jet, it's just the one scene with Katara freezing him in place with their final conflict. The Northern Air Temple, and this is really only the part where Sokka is disappointed in Sai and the gang convinces him to fight his contacts instead of working with them. Well, they sort of force him to do that, but in this, Sokka convinces him. The Cave of Two Lovers, the Great Divide, again, not a whole lot. It's basically just the conflict between brother and sister. The Winter Solstice, again, this is the Iroh and Zuko storyline, at least part 1 of the Winter Solstice. We have a teeny tiny bit of the chase and the crossroads of destiny, where Iroh talks briefly to members of the Avatar gang about what kind of person Zuko is. In the animation, he's talking to Toph in the chase, and in the crossroads of destiny, he talks to Aang, Sokka, and Toph. We also have just the teeniest touch of the Western Air Temple, but it's mainly just an image homage. The image of the flashback to Zuko's first days after being banished. And we also have a tiny little bit of Tales from Ba Sing Se and Zuko alone, just the flashback parts of Zuko alone. Moving on to character arcs, and I'm just going to read it as is on here. There was no real central character with a fully developed arc addressed in this episode, but we did have a few strong contenders. I just wouldn't say that there was one central focus, not even Aang really. I think that's why this episode felt less structurally fluid. We did have some revelations that were given arcs, and you can do that. I'm going to talk about that when we get to how you give the revelation of information its own kind of arc. But first we need to talk about themes, because there was definitely a unifying theme. It wasn't perfectly, well, it was okay matched with everything, but it wasn't executed all that well in every instance. And it wasn't that the theme wasn't executed well so much as everything around it wasn't executed well. But overall, this was still a decent episode. It's just definitely not as strong as the last one. Okay, the theme and where I found it. The primary theme here is what you find in the metaphorical darkness. The darkness of the evils of war, of personal conflict, of life expectations, and a bit of what is the antithesis of this. So it's mainly going to be focused on love, and this can be friendship love, familial love, support love, just something positive like this. And this actually made the Cave of Two Lovers part of this actually work well. I know a lot of people were like, why is this Cave of Two Lovers in here? It's supposed to be in season 2. Well, it fits thematically here. And we know that the cave thing happened on the way to Omashu in season 2, so why wouldn't you encounter the cave here? So it worked for me, not only logistically, but also thematically. So we're going to look for this theme in all of the arcs and revelations or single scene explorations. It was really hard to decide how to do this video because usually you can just follow an arc of a character and just, do that. And then occasionally one or two of them will cross over and then go separate again, or they cross over and just stay together all the time. It's not that hard. But this whole episode, it wasn't like strings with a couple twists. It was like a macrame tangle. It was really like a lot of everybody's together, they're apart, and then other people are together and they're apart. So we're gonna do our best here. Aang and Bumi were together the longest in this episode, so we'll just do them first. But it starts out first with Aang and Iroh, and they're in the prison together of Omashu. Remember, Aang got captured by the Earthbenders when he was trying to put the fires out in the marketplace after fighting Zuko. And Iroh was captured because he started firebending in order to let Zuko escape the notice of the Earthbenders. Now, I really do appreciate that the live action is giving us several conversations with Iroh and Aang together. This was a missed opportunity in the animation. They really only had one personal conversation together, and that was in Crossroads of Destiny when they were going together to rescue Katara and Zuko from the Crystal Catacombs. So I like that they decided to do this, and it's a continuation, we see, of the conversation that they had in the brig of Zuko's ship. Aang expresses anger at Zuko for starting the fight and the fires and then running away, which I thought was a little ironic. Like he didn't he didn't correlate that to himself, like this whole world goes to war, but he like runs away. Well, he had to just go have a think. So actually that would have been more for the animation, I think, than this. But anyway, at one point in the conversation, they start talking about how the dungeon is a dark place. And Iroh says that cities are like people. They always have their dark sides. What happened here happened all over the world. It's what 100 years of war will do. This is again looking at the theme of the darkness. And for Aang, it's foreshadowing the changes in Bumi. So Bumi is not quite who he was in the animation, and he's also not quite in the live action who Aang remembers from his childhood. Then at another point in the conversation, Aang at one point says, Iroh should show Zuko the way. He'll listen to you. He owes you that much. And I don't really like this line unless Iroh had had an opportunity to tell Aang that he sacrificed himself for Zuko. It just doesn't really follow, like, he owes you that much. Why would he? I mean, as far as Aang knows, they're just traveling together. But I know that they used that line because they really wanted Iroh to say this next line, and this is an Iroh serving line. And Iroh says, on the contrary, it is I who owe him far more than I could ever repay. And he puts a lot of weight into that, the actor does. I'll talk more about this scene from the Iroh perspective later. Now we're moving on to Aang and Bumi, because eventually Aang gets taken out of the prison and brought to see Bumi. Bumi is just as nutty as he was in the animation, but there's a much darker tint under all of it. I wouldn't even say tint. The nuttiness is on the outside of something darker. Okay, but first off, I wanted to mention that changes from the animation. Bumi's tests in the animation were because messing with people is fun, but also he was showing Aang that he must save the changed world by confronting the Fire Lord, and he hopes that when he does, Aang will think like a mad genius. And then Aang thanks him for his wisdom and says that he has a challenge for him, and then they go on the shoots together. Now, in the live action, we definitely see that there is something truly bitter about Bumi. He is not all light and happy on the inside. He is bitter and brought down, bogged down, hopeless in the live action, but it's all covered up by this sense of humor that he has. Now, I think that this change from the animation is sad, but necessary, and may actually be an improvement. So in the animation, Aang is never really needing to learn how to think creatively. I mean, he was a free spirit. Like, you needed Aang to think like a mad genius. I mean, I guess a mad genius is different from just being a free thinker, but this was just a fun episode in the animation. There wasn't a whole lot of weight underneath it. Now, it would be weird in the live action to have a Bumi that has been ruling for 100 years and fighting the Fire Nation take his rule seemingly unseriously when people have literally died in his city. Like, we just saw the bombing in the previous episode, and like, people were hurt. So people are dying in his own city. If he doesn't have some weight underneath him with all of that, it would not come across well. And I actually kind of like the idea that Aang from the past, the world before the war, comes back into Bumi's life and maybe brings him that spirit again. This works. It's not the same Bumi from the animation at all. It's not. I mean, the mannerisms are, the goofiness, but he's different. By the end of it, though, he is the old Bumi. Yeah, my last note here was just that if he was still his old self, it might come across as selfish or even stupid when Omashu gets captured at the end because Bumi did not fight the Fire Nation. And I know that there was a good reason for him not fighting the Fire Nation, but it sure would seem like you didn't really care about this much, just like you weren't affected by the pain of your people. Quick note, there's the Flopsy statue. I knew the moment we saw this statue, we weren't going to see real Flopsy, which is fine. But I really like the wheelie chair that they've got Bumi on. This was unique, and I enjoy stuff like this. Also, that turban is pretty cool. I have an appreciation for the costumes. Another change from the animation is that Aang recognizes Bumi right away. And I think that allowed them to make all of these challenges have something weightier to them. So in the animation, Bumi puts Aang through all of these crazy challenges, and then the final riddle in all of the challenges is, what's my name? And Aang suddenly pieces together, oh my gosh, you're my crazy friend Bumi from back 100 years ago. Here they just have him figure it out right away, and now the story is, why are you still goofy and nutty, but you definitely seem bitter, and that is the real story. So this is definitely a change from the animation. This episode had real potential to be very dark. The nuttiness that we get from this actor playing Bumi is funny, but it feels dark funny, and that is not a tone that we had in the animation at all. When Aang asks how Bumi is still alive, I love the response.
Clean living, the right diet, and luck. Hard to say if it's good or bad luck, but more importantly, how are you still alive? I'm still a child.
So at the feast that Bumi throws for Aang, Aang realizes, where he asks, was this a test? And Bumi's like, no, but, it was a game. Just like we used to play 100 years ago or whatever. At one point, Bumi says, being frozen for the last 100 years, sleeping through everything while the world was on fire and people were dying must have been nice. And this is foreshadowing what the information we're going to get about Bumi. So a lot of this arc between Aang and Bumi is basically just what has changed about Bumi. You're going to have a drop of information. This is what, first of all, we're going to have a foreshadowing of something is different than what you think it is. We're going to get some information that explains this is why Bumi is like this, and then we're going to get a twist at the end, or some sort of a conclusion or a change at the end. That's typically how revelations of information happen, how the arc works in the reveal of information. And that's what we get here. It's actually what we get with all of the different stories here. Bumi's brushing off the conversation and Aang goes, this is important, don't you care? And Bumi seems kind of enraged and gives a speech that is the heart of the theme explored in this episode.
Care? You dare tell me I should care? Have you been fighting the same fight for a century? Have you watched your whole world burn down around you? Let me tell you something, Avatar. You may be 100 years old, but you haven't lived for 100 years. Especially not these 100 years.
Again, foreshadowing the reveal of information that's going to explain why he is the way that he is. Please like, subscribe, and comment, even if it's just with an emoji. It's a free way to support the channel. Or if you're feeling really generous, check out my Patreon, Ko-fi, or hit the money heart thanks button. You can even leave me a one-time tip. Information is in the description and below. While they're walking down a hall, we have the whole Genomite crystals moment. I like that they put this in here because I always thought that the Genomite crystals was a cool thing. And they actually, in my opinion, improved what it is in the live action. They don't creep grow, they grow pretty quickly, and that's more threatening. And if it grew slowly, you wouldn't be able to do it. But here they have it feel like it is actually kind of a threat, and then also you find out it's still the same rock candy. So I do love the Genomite crystals growing super fast. The whole challenge, though, didn't seem to fit Bumi's intention. So they're talking about how Aang needs to go north, and Bumi is saying, yeah, going straight there might not be the best idea because it's all Fire Nation conquered territory between here and the North Pole. And so Aang is like, and what, I shouldn't take the straight direct path? And of course, while he's in the middle of the hall and Bumi raises a wall to keep himself out of this, that's when the Genomite crystal things happen. I would have liked that after Aang busts out of it the second time, that he rolls over to the side and stays on the side of the hallway to show that he's like learned don't walk in the middle. And other than that, this whole lesson here wasn't really in line, I think, with the theme. It kind of is, but it's you'd have to mentally finagle it to make it line in. If the theme is talking about like the darkness that you find in conflict, this is like what, so you have to do things that aren't exactly direct or straight down the middle. I mean, that it kind of hints at like, yes, sometimes you have to make really hard choices or choices you never thought that you would have to make. But I mean, you got to do some mental gymnastics to get to that point. Not a whole lot, but you do. Much better to be right on, but not too obvious. Otherwise, then it becomes too on the nose. Such a delicate balance. Then right before they go into the arena, Aang says these challenges don't make sense. And Bumi angrily says that nothing has made sense in 100 years. And Aang is like, this isn't you. This is not the fun-loving kid who always thinks about his friends. But I believe that that kid is still in you. And this is when Bumi seems to get insulted, and he says, oh, very clever. It's all about games with you. Who cares about responsibilities, about saving the world? More fun to goof off. Well, let's play one final game. And then he takes Aang into the arena and says that the final game is you have to fight me to the death. Now, about this whole fight that happens in the arena, I've heard people complaining about Bumi's costume and makeup and stuff, and like, oh, he doesn't look like an old man. Like, you want to have a real old man in here? Like, I would much prefer that we have a young person dressed up old, although you maybe could have found an old person who's super fit and can do his own stunts, but I thought this looked fine. Also, I thought that the fight looked good. There was only the one shot where Aang, it's pulled directly from the animation. Aang dodges the boulder by leaping backwards over it. Like it was a shot-for-shot replication of this shot from the animation. It just doesn't work. And it doesn't work because slow-mo of CGI like this is not quite the same thing. You do this in martial arts movies to show how cool it is that the person who is doing the action actually did this thing. The only other reason that you would do this is to give the audience time to see the reaction shot of the actor, usually how strange or silly or exaggerated it is, or to show something that they wouldn't have been able to see in real time. Like, what if in the middle of this, Aang notices something, and we see that, oh, he's noticed the thing. But the actor wasn't making a big, exaggerated, silly face or something, and he didn't see anything mid-leap, so it just didn't have the same weight as it did in the animation. I just think that this would have maybe looked better from the side or from a weird, like, other angle if they were going to replicate this particular move. Now, in the middle of the fight, we have the dialogue. There's moments where they're exchanging dialogue, and this is where it comes out what's really going on with Bumi. And we've had a lot of alluding to it, but this is where the reality of what the situation Bumi has been in comes out. Aang is saying, please, Bumi, you don't have to do this, but Bumi says, oh, but I do. Some of us have to fight, even when we don't want to. That's what it means to be in a war. And that exact line is said by Jet and also kind of said in the subtext by Iroh later on. He says, you'd have known about it if you'd been around, but you weren't. You left us. You were the Avatar and you left us. In this world, you can't rely on anyone, even your friends, especially not your friends. And at this point in the fight, Bumi pulls down a chunk of ceiling right over Aang, and Aang has to catch it with his airbending. And then unintentionally, another chunk falls right over where Bumi is, and you can tell that Bumi wasn't expecting it, but he kind of just shrugs like, oh, well, I guess that's just how it goes. And this is actually a good representation of the kind of thing that he's been going through over the last 100 years. And Aang stops that chunk as well, and he's holding both of them up. And he says, this isn't a game, Bumi. And Bumi says, yes, it is. One that requires you to make impossible choices. Do I save this town or that? Who gets the last food scraps, the orphanage or the soldiers? You have to make choices like that day after day, year after year. And that's just to save this one city. You have to save the whole world. And then he taunts Aang, saying, let it fall, Aang, and learn what it means to be the Avatar. And Aang shouts, no, and Bumi says, then the world is doomed. If Aang doesn't choose one of them to live, then both of them die. So it's like, there's no win, really. I actually really like that they did this because this is not a subject that was really touched on at all in the animation. And it's a really good, deep topic. If you were going to say the animation covered some deep topics, which it absolutely did, but the live action you would expect would try to cover more or deeper ones, or maybe ones that couldn't be explored in the animation. Like, that would have been a pretty dark thing to cover in the animation. I mean, I'm sure they could have done it. They would have found a way. But here they decided to actually do it, and I like that. Anyway, Sokka and Katara show up, and they save King Bumi, and Bumi thinks, like, what the heck? You cheated, because now Aang is safe also. This scene, by the way, is missing a transitional scene from Katara and Sokka's perspective. We'll get to that when we get to that. But Bumi accuses Aang of cheating, and he says, you didn't do it on your own, so you didn't learn anything at all. But Aang says that Bumi is wrong. He says, you can rely on your friends, and that's the only way I'm going to save the world, with my friends. Bumi accuses Aang of thinking like a child, and Aang says, is that really so bad? And then he pulls out the bison whistle, which is from a flashback we saw that Aang was given this bison whistle by Bumi. It was actually supposed to be a Badgermole, but he's like, it's my bison whistle. And he says, remember this? I use it to call a friend, and that's what I'm gonna do now. Call on an old friend. You're right. I wasn't here for the world or for you, but I'm here now. And then we see that Bumi smiles at this. In this case, the finding the light in the darkness is definitely relying on your friends sometimes to help you out of it, or finding that the light is in that friendship. And so I liked that it brought this in here. The only line that was kind of, it felt like they had to say this because it was the way to bring about the second part of the conversation, was Bumi saying, you cheated, you didn't do this on your own, so you didn't learn anything. Even though that totally relates to Bumi, it just felt like a little bit too much like just saying the thing so that way the lesson could be that you didn't go do it on your own. This would have been a hard scene to get the dialogue just right, though. And the last scene is with Bumi on the balcony, and they're talking about how, preparations are being made because we're about to be attacked by the Fire Nation now in the morning. And Aang is like, what the heck? I didn't know that's gonna happen. And Bumi's like, I want you to go. Like, you need to go, and because there's stuff that you need to go and do, we will be fine. He says, we can take care of ourselves. It's time Omashu rejoined the war. And I said, this is slightly off, that it's time Omashu rejoined the war. And I get it. It wasn't exactly clear, though, that Bumi felt that he was out of the war. So in the last episode, Jet mentioned this exact thing, that the king has kind of not done anything for a while now. And Teo's sentiment kind of reflected this. He wanted to fight. He wanted other people to fight, but it's like nobody was really doing anything. But in all this time that we just spent with Bumi in this episode, Bumi only seemed to talk about how hard it was to fight 100 years of war. It's very, very deep in the subtext that Bumi is out of the war, that's how he thinks, like that's the way he feels like he's out of it. But we spent so much time focusing on how the war has been hard to fight for 100 years. I just think it would have been good to have a moment somewhere in all of the stuff between Bumi and Aang in this episode, have him mention that he found that the only option he had to keep his people safe is to keep them out of the war, and that this is what he's been doing for the last, decade or decades. Okay, we're done with Bumi and Aang, and now we're gonna move on to Katara and Sokka. We get a short little scene with Sokka and Sai and a little thing there before we get to Sokka and Katara together. Sokka confronts Sai about aiding the enemy, and I just have to say, like, I thought this scene was nicely paced. Like, in all the the previous episode, we had a lot of like weird things going on with the pacing, and a lot of it had to do with blocking. People just standing there talking when they shouldn't be just standing there talking. They should be doing stuff. We should see things going on. And this is a situation where it is appropriate for two people to just be standing there talking. So again, it felt better. And I thought that both the actor who plays Sai and the actor who plays Sokka did this well together. So basically, Sokka is confronting Sai about his betrayal, what he's been doing. And Sai says, we do what we must to survive. We compromise just enough to survive. And Sokka says he's convinced that his father would never have done what Sai did. And this is, now in the episode, I wrote in here, this is the introduction of the theme for the episode, war forcing you to make hard choices, like bringing you into the dark place. This is the first scene in the episode that says this, but obviously I've talked about a whole bunch of other arcs and stuff before now, so we're getting it here is basically what I'm saying. Katara comes in, she knows where Aang is, he's in the prison, and then we have Aang and Katara wanting to go up there and like, hey, we need to get into the palace and we need to talk to Aang or we need to set him free. And Sai's like, you can't. And Teo's like, what about the tunnels? And then they know about the tunnels now. There's tunnels that supposedly lead into the dungeons of the palace. But Sai talks about how nobody ever comes out alive from them and they're haunted by vengeful spirits. And that's just building up tension to what's going to happen. While Sokka is looking over maps of the tunnels and notices that they don't always match, Sai gets a message from his Fire Nation contact that they want to meet. And Sokka tries to convince him to tell the Earth Kingdom soldiers and to use this as an opportunity, like a trap, to capture them and then, basically unroot the Fire Nation network of spies. And Sai says that they can't because he was told that if they get any resistance, that they're going to send everything that they've got at Omashu. And we end this scene with Teo saying, let them come. The Avatar has returned. It's time to stop hiding. It's time to fight. The only line I would have cut is that final line with Teo. It would have been much better to end this with the uncertainty. Is Sai going to do the right thing? And you could convey that there's going to be a conversation between Teo and Sai simply by Sai looking like he doesn't know what to do, and then you see Teo looking at him. I'm one of those people who I'm like, let actors act. And you know who's a great example of this is Paul Sun-Hyung Lee in this episode. You don't have to, actors can convey so much emotion if they're allowed to do that. And maybe they felt like the kids couldn't do this yet. I don't know. Well, I have no idea why they didn't do it. And it could be that it wasn't written that way and they just didn't think to do it. Okay, this scene with Katara collecting all her gear, I didn't expect this to happen to me, but when she picked up the water flask, I started tearing up. I didn't realize I was so attached to Katara's water flask. They definitely did that for people who are fans of the original animation. I don't think we ever actually saw her grab the water flask in the animation. It just suddenly was like, oh, she's starting to use this water flask that she's got on her hip. But okay, so she's getting all this stuff and she's confronted by Jet, who's like, you betrayed us. And she says she stopped him from killing innocent people. And he points out that, they were spies and traitors, but Katara's like, not everyone out there is the enemy. And Jet says, if you stand against us, you are. And Katara tries to leave, but he steps in her way and he says, life may be simple in the South Pole, but here you have to make hard decisions. That's what it means to fight a war. Again, this all tracks with the theme, and this exact line was said earlier by Bumi, and then, in the episode, it's later by Bumi. And we will see that Iroh also kind of alludes to this. I like that Jet seems hurt, and it says, I thought you were on our side, on my side. And Katara says, Jet, you've forgotten what you're fighting for. You told me to remember my mom, and I did. I remembered she never wanted bitterness to fill my heart. And I said, this is good for Jet to hear, but for Katara, it makes me wonder if they're going to cut the anger that she has towards the Fire Nation for killing her mother. And that hatred gives us one of the best climactic episodes. Probably it's so close to my favorite episode. There's so many episodes that are so good. That is one of the best, though. Now, even having this line here in the live action, they can still bring us there. They can still have that moment, even with her preaching all of this to Jet, by simply having her overwhelmed by the surge of hatred when she is faced with her mother's killer. So in the animation, she shows compassion for the Fire Nation people a lot, way before any of that happens. So that tracks with her feeling like she can spout this out to Jet. But the situation can be very different when you're faced with the exact person who killed your mother. And we see this sort of reflected in the earthbending soldier who has a conversation with Iroh later. Katara says, that's how I know you've ended up on the wrong side. You're not fighting for anything you love. You're fighting because of hate, just like the Firebenders. And Jet is really upset about this and says that he's nothing like the Firebenders. And then Katara tries to leave, but Jet grabs her shoulder, and then she throws him to the ground. And then as he's getting up, she uses her water bending to blast him so that he can't get up again. And then she freezes the water with an exhale. Now, I wasn't a fan of how they executed this exhale effect. I like that they did it, but this looks like her breath is freezing the water. And in the animation, it very much seemed like she exhaled, like there was a coldness to her, and the water just froze, the frozen ice crept up Jet. I wish they could have replicated that. I also wish that they didn't replicate the same angle, like the close-up, because in the animation, there was a very distinct expression on Katara's face that she had this like spite, cold, like that was how she did this. And we didn't get that out of the actress in this scene. And also you missed out on, I've seen actually a behind the scenes of her practicing this exact move. It's like a whole body movement, and you just couldn't see that because you're only getting from the waist up on the actress. So I feel like they missed out on possibly a better angle of this exact move because they were trying to replicate the animation. But anyway, so I also just didn't like that she throws Jet. Typically you would have this like I've defeated you moment would be because you were taught this move earlier, preferably by the guy you just did it to. So if Jet had showed her how to do this, I would be like, yes, that's what you do. That she's turning the power back on him, basically. If I was going to rewrite this scene, though, I would say what she should have done is used the water whip to knock him down the first time. Like he grabs her shoulder and she does something to like a reverse whip or something and it gets him. But I think for budget, they may not have done that. So I do get that.
Goodbye, Jet.
Look at the power you have. That's because of me.
That wasn't you. That was me.
This is a nice, badass line for Katara to say, showing that her confidence in herself and her abilities has risen to the point that she's unafraid of facing the person who helped her achieve that. But it felt like Jet only said that line because they wanted Katara to have this line. His line doesn't really make any sense for his character up until now. At no point did he seem to show that he believed that like the freedom fighters were effective and powerful because of him, like that's where his mind would go with this. And I said, if this was my script, I would have had just a bit more of an exchange in dialogue while he's still frozen there. So I would have had him say something more along the lines of the things that he's already talked about with Katara and indicated are in his heart. So she just accused him of being like the Fire Nation or like a firebender. Earlier, he told her that they don't have to be afraid of their pain. They just have to decide what to do with it. I would have preferred that the final exchange be centered around that. So I thought his line should be something like, the Fire Nation didn't care about what they did to my parents, to you, to your mother. Are you just going to forget what they did to her? And Jet actually says something like this in the animation. And Katara could say, you told me to remember the sunrise, Jet, but do you remember your own? I can't think that your parents would have wanted you to be killing innocent people for their sake. What would they say of what you've become? And she can still have a nice badass line at the end. I hope you can decide to do something better with your pain, Jet, and then walk off. Leaving the conversation like this not only closes up the conversation that they've been having since the last episode, but it also leaves the window open for Katara to still harbor hatred for the Fire Nation and the Bender who killed her mother, and for Jet to want to go straight as he does in the second season. So he would have left this final confrontation with Katara and self-reflected and thought about the things that she said, thinking, what would my parents think of me? And when we get to the second season where he's gone straight, it's because of what she said to him. His parents would not have approved of that. Okay, now we're moving on to Katara and Sokka and their adventures in the cave and then the tunnels. They get into the cave and there are the hippie nomads. And anybody who complains about them being here, I don't get it. I thought it was perfectly in line with the absurdity of the animation, number one. And the main purpose that they served in the animation was to annoy Sokka and indicate that there's a story about two lovers and the secret tunnel, and then guide the gang to the entrance of the secret tunnels. And then remember, if they end up being pushed through because they're being chased, you get that. Here, they're already at the cave that is the entrance to the secret tunnels. And I actually really like that they just know the story, that the story is there, and they tell it to the gang, the story of the two lovers. And the live action decided that Sokka is actually kind of enjoying the music and starts dancing with it, like when he gets into it. I liked that. Sokka from the animation was a poet and a bit of a romantic, if you remember. So if he's not under the pressure of, we have to get through here, or I've been separated from my friends and now I desperately need to reach them, He wouldn't be trying to get straight answers from a bunch of people who clearly have been on cactus juice for most of their lives. So that would definitely frustrate somebody who would be determined to, reunite with his friends or get to Amashu quickly. You get the idea. So since there's not this huge amount of pressure, they're at the entrance to the tunnels. He's just sitting there like, okay, yeah. They're not wasting time either because this is where they're getting the instructions on, the tunnels are right there. This was also the only chance to throw some real levity in there. And having Avatar with no comedy doesn't work. It is not Avatar if there is no humor. And so here it is. And it was perfect replication of animation to live action of the hippie nomads.
Yeah, that was all kinds of right. So what are you doing here?
What are we doing here? What are you doing here?
We're doing what we're doing.
Right, but why are you doing it here?
Acoustics, best in Omashu. Hear that? Harmony. That's what we're all about. Harmony, music, love.
I freaking love the silly exchange that they have, and, we're doing what we're doing. And then the harmonizing, I love this. I just love this. To me, this is just so charming and so funny. And thematically, it actually works too. Like having the hippies here thematically works. So the hippies are go with the flow, right? And this is a good contrast to Bumi and the others who are fighting the war, or the war sometimes forces you to do things, right? I don't know if that's actually what the writers realized they were doing when they put the hippies in here. It's probably just a happy coincidence, but sometimes that happens and you just kind of go like, oh yes, I definitely thought that when I put them in here. No, it works. I like this a lot. After Chong shows them that that's the tunnels over there, he tells them the story of the two lovers and he brings them over to a relief in the stone wall. And I love the way this was animated. So in the animation, it's a painting, a watercolor painting that comes to life. Here, they just color in the relief images, and I thought that was great. I wasn't really a fan of the music played during this. It was too epic, I think, but it's still fine. They only made 2 changes to the story. One was switching it to Oma being the one who dies instead of Shu. And the second change is that they changed it from the story of a man and a woman to a woman and a woman. It was very nonchalant, and you probably wouldn't even notice it unless you pay very close attention to word choices, which of course I do because that is my job. Now, if you're going to change a character relationship by changing the sex of one of those characters and then it becomes a gay relationship, this is the least obstructive way to do it. It really does not affect anything else at all. If you've seen my Wheel of Time videos, you know that I had a big problem with them doing this in that. And the reason is because they changed straight characters into gay characters who had friendships in the books, but now it's romantic relationships. But then it turns out that one of those friends was supposed to be in a romantic relationship with one of the main characters. It's like, this is problematic. You're creating new drama that was never there in the original, which means you're gonna have to change a lot. Anyway, that's a whole other discussion. Actually, no, it's the same discussion. It's the same idea, but we're talking about this. This didn't really affect anything at all. So as far as an adaptation goes, I didn't have a problem with this. However, it does feel like tokenism. I think it just straight up is tokenism. I've had discussions with my gay friends and gay commenters and patrons about Hollywood changing straight characters into gay characters in adaptations, and about poorly written gay characters and gay relationships, and about token gay relationships or kiss. Like when you see that there's like a scene that plays out and there's like a kiss over there and it's like, oh, there was a gay thing in the show. If there's a message I want to convey to the higher-ups in Hollywood, it's this. Don't do this. You don't need to do this. The call for more gay characters is not a request to change straight characters into gay characters in their adaptations, because that is usually just a bad idea all around. And if it's a small enough thing to not change anything else in the story, like in this case, it's basically tokenism, and we all just roll our eyes at it because it is obvious that it is tokenism. The call is for original gay characters, preferably well-written gay characters and gay relationships. And I wish people would state this publicly so that the message can be heard at the tops of those high-rises where all the money people hang out, because maybe then we would see this sort of stuff happening. And not happening. I said if you're going to write gay characters, commit and do it right. Don't do it to characters that are adapted from straight in the original. because that is more likely going to result in something worse than tokenism. It's going to result in forced bad writing, just like we had in The Wheel of Time. There's plenty of good IPs with great gay characters that you can adapt. Just do that. Or write some original characters in original stories and write them well. You get the idea. Anyway, moving on.
Love is brightest in the dark. Remember that. Especially if you're going to go into the dark void from which no living being ever returns.
After the hippies tell the story, they break out into the song Secret Tunnel. And I love this, and I just have to say that the translation from animation to live action was spot on. It was perfect. So in the animation, you only get 3 characters named. Chong, he's the leader. His wife, Lily, in here, she's on the flute. And Moku, who is laying on the floor playing the drums, like he's the percussionist. But I have to give a special shout out to the unnamed hippie girl, how she is swinging her arms. Like, you nailed it. That was, I don't think that the dance from the animation could have been replicated more perfectly. You did it.
They're doomed.
So I saw that they're in season 2. So I want more. Like, I really liked the song that they had in the live action when we walked in. It was The Jewel of My Heart. Like, that was a nice song, and it was exactly what I would think that they'd be singing. I want more songs. So I hope we're going to get more songs. And I hope we're going to get, at some point, one of the silly narrative songs where Chong is like narrating what's going on in song. It was really cute. Anyway, I just hope we get more of them. It's a nice, easy way to bring in the silliness from the animation. At one point when they're going through the tunnels, Katara is like, where are we going? Do you know where we're going? Whatever. And Sokka is like, no, but I have a hunch. He's like, like an instinct. And that's an homage to the Jet episode. But basically they start having an argument here. Sokka is asking her what her problem is because she keeps questioning everything that he's doing. And she's like, I'm upset that, you're not taking me seriously. She says, I'm not a little girl anymore. And Sokka points out that she keeps acting like one. And Katara's like, you always act like you know everything, but you couldn't even tell that a traitor was lying to you. And he says, you're the one who fell for a terrorist. And then he says that she should never have talked to him. And Katara's like, you don't get to tell me who I can talk to. And then he says, Dad put me in charge. And she says, you're not Dad. And they both kind of realize that their arguing is getting a little bit too personal, and then they both sit down next to each other and kind of talk about how they miss Gran and her cooking and stuff like that. And then they just pack up and keep going. This is fine, you don't have to resolve this yet. But Katara is playing with water while she's walking, and this is something that she did in the animation a lot. She would be constantly practicing her water bending in little ways here and there. Like, this is good. I like that they're having her do this. And he's like, hey, you're starting to get good at that. And she's like, it helps. I got some good instruction. And he goes, oh yeah, from the water bending scroll or whatever. She's like, yeah. And also Jet kind of helped me with some stuff. And this does keep on theme. Remember, it's part of the theme is there's the darkness and the conflict, but then there's finding light in it, right? So she starts talking about how, Jet was forced into the position that he was in. Like, he wasn't all bad and some of the stuff that he taught me was good. Like, basically that sentiment. And then she says that Sai was kind of pushed in the same way. And that's when Sokka tells her, like, he told me that my true calling is to be an engineer. And you can tell that this is like him opening up about something that was, meaningful to him. See, this is one of the reasons why I think it would have been good for Katara's last bit with Jet should be more focused on how, like, he forgot the good things. And here she is living that, where she doesn't forget that even though Jet betrayed me, he gave me some good things. And then she's trying to teach that here to Sokka as well. Yes, I know you're hurt. Sai betrayed you, but, you are a gifted engineer, and him saying that, knowing that it's something that is important to him. You get the idea. And it turns back to their dad when Sokka says, it was good to hear somebody say that he had something to offer the world. And this is hinting at something that the live action has done with Sokka and his dad, and it will be revealed in a later episode that was not in the animation. But we'll get to that when we get to that. But Katara starts to kind of apologize for what she said about Sokka not being bad, and Sokka's trying to brush it off, and she's like, no, look. She says, you led the tribe and protected us with no one to help you. Dad never had to bear that kind of burden alone. So it's like, you've got it harder than he did. And you can see that Sokka really appreciates that. I said this conversation feels a bit unfocused, like especially when we can consider like what happened up before. But like, I see why they've brought it like this, you know, that they're finding light in the situation. Like, Sokka, you've had to deal with a lot of hard stuff, but that's amazing. Like, the fact that you've done it, that's a good thing. Like, finding the good part out of this bad situation. Like, again, it's like you kind of finagle to find that, but there you go. He said the conversation feels a bit unfocused, but it's not the worst thing ever. It is a slight furtherance from the last time that they talked like this. So back in episode 1, Katara said, I know how hard this responsibility has been for you, but there's more to being a leader than just catching fish. So it wouldn't be like, this is a good time to have the two of them talk, you know, they're alone together. This is when you would do this. The only thing I would have changed is that I would have had Sokka concede something to Katara here as well, because she basically says, you had it harder than Dad, but he hasn't kind of returned any kind of a, you know, something here. I said perhaps something along the lines of actually putting to words that he couldn't believe Sai was such a traitor because he made him feel so proud of his own engineering skills, kind of comparing to Katara, like, I know I called you falling for a terrorist or whatever, but I kind of fell for Sai as well. Not in the same way, but you get the idea. And I said Katara could reply to this by saying that Sai being a traitor doesn't mean that the good things he said about you weren't valid. And I said, otherwise, I like that they turned this being in the tunnels into Sokka and Katara coming together. The siblings fight very frequently throughout the series, but it's not really addressed directly. And I'm talking about the animation. They have little things throughout the entire series that are never really on the forefront. But there's a couple of episodes where we have a moment where we kind of address it. And there was, you know, the Great Divide, and then we have the Runaway. In the Runaway, it's more like she overhears how Sokka really thinks about Katara. It's a tough one. This is a tough scene, I'm guessing, to write. So they do put out their lanterns and follow the crystals, and Sokka is marking where they've been. And actually, I like that when he marks, it glows. I don't think it makes geological sense, but it's cool. But then at a later point, they light their lanterns again, and I'm going, how did they light them? But then we get to the main weak moment in this episode, and this is the Badgermoles. And this actually works canonically with what we had in the animation, but it's so rough. It's hard to hear the dialogue doing this. The only way you could have done this without having this awkward dialogue, though, would be to have more interactions with the Badgermole, and that would have been super expensive. Even what they've done, you can tell the Badgermole is in it as little as possible. You have like 3 shots of the Badgermole, like very little, and no interaction. Like, you don't see the actors really interacting with it except for the one time that Sokka gets almost like grabbed by it or whatever. But there are some scenes where it's like we had the camera on Sokka and Katara, and they're looking at the Badgermole and like discovering things about it. Like, Katara notices that it's blind, and the audience didn't notice that they're blind until after she did. And usually you want it to be the opposite. You want it to be like, we look at the Badgermole and we can tell there's something up with its eyes. And so we're going, huh? And then we see Katara, she's thinking the same thing. And then she goes like this. Like, they didn't do that. They just we're looking at the kids, they're scared. And then they look up and then Katara's like, oh, they're blind. And we're like, how do you know? And then we see it and we're like, oh, the eyes. You get the idea. It's just, that's an editing thing. But I think that it was like that because it was like the less footage of the Badgermole, the more affordable. But anyway, so basically the awkward thing here is Katara straight up theorizes the reason why the Badgermoles didn't attack them is because right when they were about to, Sokka and Katara hold hands and they both apologize to you. I'm sorry, me too. And then they wait to die, but it doesn't kill them. And so she goes, oh, it's because they sense, not with their eyes, they sensed love. Like, she looks at her hands, their hands holding together. She's like, they feel the feelings. It came off like that. This is so awkward, but I really don't know how else you could have done this without more interactions with the Badgermoles. And then it can be in, oh, we observe this, but it doesn't have to be said because saying it is so awkward. And plus, it's the way that this works canonically is, remember how Toph feels the vibrations of people. She can sense heartbeats. She can tell if you're lying. She can like tell how you feel with her feet on the ground if you're standing on the ground too. And she learned all of this from the Badgermoles, so they would be able to sense how these two people feel about each other, especially if their last moments, they're like, we're gonna die together, like I'm with you, you're with me. So they would sense that that's different from hostility, people fighting. So it works canonically, but if you were gonna say this in the shortest way, fewest words possible, that's what Katara did here, and it's very awkward. So I said it would have been better if the kids don't ever figure out why they're coming after them, but then it would have felt inconclusive. I said, but I think that they could have had the Badgermoles find them sooner while they're arguing, like it's aggressive, like they come to attack because they're fighting, but somehow they get away, and then the Badgermole's coming after them, and then they hold hands, and then it doesn't attack them. And then they're like, let's sneak away. And she'd be like, no, don't move. And then it'll get aggressive, and then they like together again, and then it seems to calm down. And after some trial and error, they kind of figure it out. I mean, me personally, if a giant monster that had just been attacking me suddenly froze, I wouldn't assume, oh, it's because they sense that I'm not a threat. Or because of love. Like, I would have just like, he's trying to decide how to eat me. But yeah, spending more time with the Badgermoles would have been too expensive, so I get why they didn't do it. Anyway, Sokka says, oh, how do you think they do with verbal commands? Hey, can you take us to the palace? And then it digs into the wall, and we later see Sokka and Katara pop up out of nowhere in the arena. We're missing a scene where either a giant Badgermole busts into the arena and Katara and Sokka are right behind him, or it digs into like the dungeons and you see them come out and you can hear like the ground shaking or something, and they're like, where are all the guards? And they hear the ground shaking and assume, well, that is obviously where Aang must be, because, you know, big crazy things happen around Aang. So they run towards the chaos and they're like, bye Badgermole or whatever, and then they go. Like that transitional scene was definitely needed. But again, would have been expensive. Also, I'm not a fan of the Badgermoles understanding, can you take us to the palace? They did specify in the animation that animals are animals. They don't understand. Remember the whole thing with Momo when Katara kept saying, go get me something? Momo didn't understand. He just like was bringing all these like, you know, a mouse and like, you know, a crown at some point. Where did he get that? Like different stuff like this. I guess he understood to bring him something. I just can't imagine asking a Badgermole, can you take us to this place? And it understands to go. But then again, I don't know how else they would have done this. Maybe if I sat and brainstormed for a while, maybe you guys can think of some way that it would have made sense for them to be like, hey, let's follow the Badgermole or whatever. I don't know. Or maybe it just starts digging and then looks back at them and then they follow it, and maybe, okay, I'm coming up with an idea here. Maybe this is how it was with the two lovers, that the Badgermoles would lead them to the top of the mountain. And so that's where they're going, because the palace is at the top of the mountain. So the Badgermoles are used to, like, if you find two people who are not trying to kill each other, lead them to the top of the mountain. There you go. Maybe that's it. But then how do you explain that that's what it was? Who knows? Maybe Bumi could explain it. Maybe his pets are the Badgermoles instead of Flopsy. And this is also one of the reasons why Bumi is such a good earthbender, is he has this relationship with the Badgermoles. I forgot to mention that in the scene with Bumi talking to Aang and Katara and Sokka at the very end on the balcony and saying, oh, we know that the Fire Nation is on their way to attack, Bumi mentions that Sai alerted them to an entire network of Fire Nation spies in the city, so they are going to be prepared this time. And Sai comes walking up. Sokka looks at him, just giving their little interaction closure. He asked Sai to please do the right thing, and Sai did. Sai was in a dark place, but he found the light and did the right thing. Now we're getting to my favorite stuff in this episode, the Zuko and Iroh stuff. But it starts out with the Aang and Iroh thing, remember? So we're in the prison, the dungeon with Iroh and Aang, and they're talking together. So now we're going to talk about all the things that happened in this conversation that were that were good to Iroh's arc here. So remember that one point where Iroh points out that cities are like people, though they always have their dark sides. What happened here happened all over the world. It's what 100 years of war will do. And I said, for Iroh, this is explaining who he is today and foreshadowing the flashbacks that we will see of him. It also foreshadows what we will see in the new character of the earthbending soldier that he has a conversation with, how these characters were changed by war. And it also explains Zuko being the way that he is. It's good. I like it. That same bit of dialogue did for Iroh all that stuff, and for Aang, it foreshadowed the changes that he was going to see in Bumi. That's like so much work being done by dialogue and like a little bit of dialogue. And I really like it when few words do a lot of work, like multiple levels of work. That's good. Iroh tells Aang at one point, Ozai only sees things through one lens, victory or defeat. Nothing else matters, not even loved ones lost along the way. Zuko's victory lies not in winning the war, but in winning his life back. And Aang says, you could show him this isn't the way, he'll listen to you, he owes you that much. And as I said, I don't like that line, but I'm sure that they wrote it because they wanted Iroh's next line. Iroh says, on the contrary, it is I who owe him far more than I could ever repay. And this is foreshadowing to the revelations that will flip the narrative about Iroh that is about to happen. So we're going to learn a lot about Iroh in this episode and how it will explain what we know of him so far in the live action. So we have Iroh being taken to the prison camp, the pit. And along the way, he has interactions with this Earth Kingdom soldier. So I really like this actor's performance of this character, and I really like this character. He's a very small role, very well performed, and it was a good addition to the show. So in the animation, we don't really get a whole lot of the perspective of Iroh was a brutal war general for the Fire Nation before. He laid siege to Ba Sing Se for 600 days. People are going to hate him and have a right to hate him for the things that he did. And even though it was just said in the animation, it was never really shown quite like this. At first, Iroh is like, oh, that's a lot of people that you've got to escort just one me. I feel so honored. And the soldier points out to him, you know what? A lot of people around here, if they knew that the Dragon of the West was here, they might want to take matters into their own hands before we get to the pit. You know, like just reminding, or in the case of the live action, telling us that he is a very hated person in the Earth Kingdom. But so anyway, the soldier asks him, like, is there anything I can do to make your journey more comfortable? And Iroh just like, I'm fine, thank you. And the soldier punches him in the gut. And we're going to see why that happens later. But in the meantime, Iroh has taken out the White Lotus tile that he bought in town in the previous episode and drops it. And that's so that Zuko can find it. In the next scene, they've stopped for water, and the soldier holds out a flask to Iroh, but as Iroh's about to reach for it, he pours it out. And then he starts telling Iroh the story of his brother, who was a kind soul, who, you know, basically fresh water was rationed in Ba Sing Se after the first year of the 600 days, which is almost 2 years of a siege that Iroh was leading. And now this soldier's brother was always thinking about the kids, and so he would collect rations from the other soldiers in his platoon and give them to the children. And then one day, Iroh blew up the Western Wall. I can't remember what he said. He set fire to a wall or whatever, and the brother was killed on that day in that battle. And he was only 19 years old. And the soldier says, all those lives lost, all that fighting, and Ba Sing Se still stands. Was it worth it? And when he said this, I thought that they were going to maybe touch on that feeling of senseless death. Like there was no point to the death because Ba Sing Se is still there. So they were fighting over Ba Sing Se. For 600 days, he was laying siege to the city, and in the end, just left. So it's like anybody who died in there, there would be this feeling of like you didn't even win the city. Like maybe if you won the city, then he lost in the defeat of Ba Sing Se, but you didn't even win. It was such a waste. But I thought that was conveyed so nicely by this actor. I mean, I don't know who he is, but congratulations. You were one of the standout performances in this show, like really nailed your role. And at this moment, Iroh says that they were at war, he was a soldier. And the soldier says, you were a butcher. And then he tells him that I can still smell the smoke when I go to sleep at night. And then he slaps Iroh. And then Iroh, blood coming from his nose, says, war pushes us to the edge. Some of us don't like what we find there. Again, the theme being pushed into darkness, right? And the soldier asks if that's Iroh's pitiful way of saying he's sorry for what he did. And Iroh says that he wasn't talking about himself. And the soldier is enraged by this and raises a boulder up out of the ground over Iroh's head like he's going to smash him. And Iroh is very defiant, staring this soldier down. But the other soldiers come in and stop him, and he says to Iroh, he's like, "You have no humanity, do you? It's true. You know nothing of loss." And that is foreshadowing what we're going to find out. Anyway, he puts the boulder down, and as soon as the soldier walks away, Iroh seems to let go of that defiance, like there was something in there that was almost performative, and now he's like back to his own self. And then we get the best flashback in the season. One of the best scenes. This is the one that I think stands on its own. I think that you could take this, just this flashback, and show it to somebody. And actually, you could attach the next one behind it too, and it would work great. Show this scene to somebody, and tears would come to their eyes. It is so well acted. It's like the setup is beautiful, and then Paul Sun-Hyung Lee just like hits a home run, hardly moving at all, just beautiful performance. It's well written, well blocked. Oh, it's just so good. I'm just gonna read my notes. I have nothing critical to say about this scene. It's totally original. This was not in the animation, but we know that something like this may have gone down based on the flashbacks that we saw of Zuko in Zuko Alone, where Zuko learns of Lu Ten's death and is saddened by it and expresses compassion towards Iroh, while Azula calls him a coward for abandoning the siege because of the death of his son. I said, Paul Sun-Hyung Lee won me over 100% as Iroh right in this scene. No dialogue, no movement, 100% in the stiff upper lip breaking at the compassion shown to him by Zuko. It was perfection. This scene did make me tear up, just like the tale of Iroh in Tales from Ba Sing Se in scene 2. Like, I totally teared up. It got me. It's good. I said this scene is so well constructed in the writing, the blocking, the soundtrack being that gentle refrain of Leaves on the Vine. So you don't have to know the song Leaves on the Vine to have been affected by its use in this scene. Like the people in the live action who've never seen the animation wouldn't recognize it, but because it is this soft, gentle, quiet little melody, it is so perfect for this moment because it was something so subtle and gentle that brought the emotion in this moment. I mean, other than the beautiful performance by the actor. But yeah, I said this scene was written and executed perfectly, setting up the scenario, the dead son, the funeral with the father sitting there, people thinking that he is a coward. They try to comfort him by saying that it was a great honor for his son to die for the Fire Nation. And then for a young boy, a reflection of the lost son, to be the only one who second guesses what he said to his uncle, and to offer real compassion, to share a story of how good a man Lu Ten was, and then to say, to offer figuratively with this medal, like that this brought me strength, and he's handing it now to Iroh, like, I hope you have strength too. And then for him to sit beside him, like in solidarity, in like the most subtle way, like he didn't hug him or put his arm around it. I'm sitting beside you, like with you, like I am here next to you. It's so good. Again, this was not in the animation. It's totally original. Absolutely gorgeous. This is called faithful creation, not faithful recreation, and it was perfect. Okay, I'm jumping over to Zuko now. The first scene is just basically nothing. We got Zuko ambushes a guard and steals his uniform. We got that. And the next scene we show that he's somehow gotten into the dungeons in the palace. Obviously he would be able to if he's, dressed up as a guard. And he gets caught by another guard and says, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be here for prison transfer, but I am late and I've already gotten in so much trouble this month. And so the guard presents this scenario to him. He says, the firebender has been taken to the pit, but the bald one was taken to see the king. Well, what are you gonna do? And I thought, well done here. So Zuko is faced with get the avatar, which means getting back his own father, or save Iroh. And I'm so glad that they threw this choice at him. So in the animation, he was faced with choices like this. And actually in this moment, this is from the winter solstice where Iroh gets kidnapped and then he, goes to track him down. And it's after he has found the first clue of, I know my uncle is in that direction, and then suddenly he notices up in the sky Katara fly by on Appa. And it's like, do I abandon going to get my uncle, or do I go get the Avatar, or do I go get my uncle? And you're kind of like, I don't know, what is he gonna do? And then right when they're about to smash Iroh's hands under a boulder, Zuko shows up to save the day, and then they escape together. So there's a little bit of tension there. And they've cut that out here because we see him at the beginning of this journey, and he's faced with that choice. What do you do? Now that's where the weight is here. Zuko is being faced with those two choices right here. So this is a good scene to keep, but its purpose is different. It's to show that he has this choice and he chooses his uncle. This is why I said in the last episode that the stuff that was happening there was setting up Zuko for Zuko's love of Iroh being revealed to Zuko. Like, here's the choice, and if he chooses Iroh, there's no denying he would have chosen Iroh over the Avatar if he had to, and because he does, which kind of means he would choose Iroh over his own father if you think about it. Until we get to the end of season 2, which is really good. Anyway, I just had one note on here that in the animation, Zuko is regularly faced with two choices where it would, for his character, really be a struggle, like which one do you go for? And this is a very good way to write like a page turner or just a compelling story or compelling character in general, is to have that be something that's constantly plaguing them. I highly recommend that kind of storytelling. So in the next scene, Zuko's running down the road in the woods, and he finds the lotus tile, picks it up and says, "I'm coming, uncle." So at that point, the suspense of not knowing if he's gonna go save Iroh is gone. It was very short-lived in the animation, so it wouldn't have been worth it to do that here. I tried to figure out how could you do this in the live action, like have him be faced with that choice before we see him rescue. And all the ways I could think of were like, well, you could cut out the lotus tile thing. You don't really want to do that. It was kind of like a thing, right? Or you could have Zuko not do the guard thing in the prison. You could have him find the lotus tile, and then he knows the road to take, and then he's going down the road, and then maybe he comes across Appa parked. But then you would have had to have Appa being parked in the previous episode, and if you didn't have that, then he would come across Appa and be like, but he also already knows that Aang is in Omashu because he just fought him there, so I don't know. It wouldn't have worked. They did it the best way. They just decided, no suspense, we don't need that. I said, the thrill of not knowing whether he will come to save Iroh before Iroh is hurt is as cheap as those movies where everyone thinks that the hero died in the big bad battle, at the very end, but it turns out that he was just unconscious for the few seconds that you were looking to see if he was alive. And then I listed examples: Anastasia, Ants, The Black Cauldron, The Jungle Book, Robin Hood, Lady and the Tramp, Johnny Tremaine, Homeward Bound. And then I just said, Disney has a problem. Not all of these are Disney, like Anastasia and Ants. Well, they are now. Anyway, Zuko attacks the transport, and again, this looks freaking great. Anytime that we see these kids doing martial arts, like doing their own stunts, I'm just like, I love it. More of this, please. This is good. I love this. The only thing I didn't like was the way he broke the shackles, and it's definitely an homage to how he breaks the chains on Iroh in the animation. It's, the kick still looks cool. The fact that he broke it looks cool. Definitely not physically possible. The only thing I would have changed is he should have had flames coming off of his heel when he broke it, like so that it looks like, oh, he used some firebending in some way to do it. Because that's me nitpicking. It still looked cool. So, very delicate balance. I want the realism of there's no way that you could just stand there and slice through with your heel. Then again, slamming your heel on a stone, on a chain on a stone, I don't think that would work either. It's okay. It looked cool. Good job to this kid. You look awesome when you're doing your stuff, just in case anybody's watching. We do have a final confrontation where Iroh fights with Zuko against the Earthbenders, and it was great. I loved seeing Iroh fight too. They did this right. So I don't know if Paul Sun-Hyung Lee knows any martial arts, but he executed everything perfectly. Like, well done. So I'm a martial artist. I do fencing though. It's a Western martial art, not an Eastern. And old people are super hard to fight because they are very technically good. They've been around. So they don't move. They're not as athletic. but they are still really hard to fight. And I know this because I go to veteran events. I'm a veteran, considered a veteran-aged fencer. But it's always been tough fighting veterans. They are technically great. And so when I saw the way that they had Iroh fighting, I was like, that's the impression I get. This is a guy who's got power, but he doesn't have to move like Zuko does, because he knows how to do better, more efficient stuff that doesn't involve the flips and kicks and whatnot. But he fights with the red hot chains. That was just like in the animation. I like that. But anyway, he has a final confrontation with the Earthbender soldier, and the Earthbender soldier is like taunting him, like, just do it, like, kill me, which is actually what we had Bumi saying to Aang. I didn't even think about that. But in the case where Aang was with Bumi, the light was the friend coming in, and here the light is Iroh knowing that truth. There's been too much killing, and he doesn't kill the Earthbender. He has mercy on him. But then, of course, as he turns his back, the Earthbender shoots a bunch of stones at him, and Iroh gets injured. Not super seriously, but enough that it's slowing them down. So they're climbing into a boat, and then as they're climbing in, Iroh is commenting, like, seems like our whole life we're either getting on or off boats. Maybe that's our lot in life. And they shove off, and then we get the last flashback, and I love it. It's a great follow-up to the first one. So Zuko has clearly just been burned because he's wearing the patch over his eye. This is why I thought of the Western Air Temple episode, which is in season 3, because we get 2 flashbacks of this image of Iroh standing behind Zuko, who has the fresh patch on his eye because it just happened.
Ah, good. It's not too late.
What are you doing here, Uncle?
Same as you. Getting ready to embark on what is sure to be a memorable journey.
You want to come with me?
I've come fully prepared. All the tea I need.
I don't need a babysitter.
How about a friend?
My father made it very clear that I am not to return until I find the Avatar, which means it could be a very long time before we return home.
Home. Everything I need is on this boat. Like I said, all the tea I need.
This scene, it is like so good. The first one was the top for sure, but this is like so close right underneath it. So let me read what I wrote. Again, this scene was perfection. I loved every second of it. I like that for the first time we see this new cheerful side of Iroh that we've seen through the whole live action series, revealing the pain and the love that's right there under the surface all the time. And this is 100% Paul Sun-Hyung Lee. Maybe it was in the writing that he's supposed to break a little bit when he says, how about a friend? Everything I need is home. Everything I need is on this boat. Like, I don't know whose choice that was, but it was a good choice. And it was beautifully executed. Having everything else be that same bubbly, cheerful tone like we had in every other episode with Iroh, and then just those 2 lines. Oh, so good. The only time we had a scene like this was in The Siege of the North when Iroh sends Zuko off. Like, Zuko is going to sneak into the northern water tribe's fortress, basically, city. And that wasn't even as big of a contrast moment because Iroh was worried about Zuko and was like, be careful, this is going to be so dangerous. That was the only time we saw this sort of thing between Iroh and Zuko by this point. It does happen again later, but at this point. But this was really good to see too. To see that underneath all of the cheerfulness, there's this, and it's always there. I love it. I love it. I wish the rest of this episode was as awesome as these 2 scenes. And the one with the soldier was really good too. Anyway, back on the boat, they're rowing off, and Zuko looks up in the sky and sees in the silence Appa float by or fly by with, obviously, the avatars on there. And Iroh asks, what is it, Zuko? And Zuko says, nothing, let's get you home. So even though, like, I mean, first of all, I don't think he would have been able to pursue them. Like, obviously they're flying by and here's Zuko stuck on the ground. But you can tell, like, he's really determined to go after him, so good there. The flashbacks for Iroh reflect love being found in the darkness. We saw Iroh in his darkest hours after losing his son, but then finding Zuko. And then the second flashback reverses it. When Zuko is in his darkest hour, having just been banished, Iroh shows up to be the light for him and show him love. They're perfect. Like, they're perfect. Perfectly executed scenes. And that's it for this episode. Like I said, the themes were not always well executed, but they were there. They were there. And I wouldn't even say that they weren't like well matched, so much as the stuff happening around them wasn't always great. But then again, you have the Iroh and Zuko stuff and it was just fantastic. It's like, when you have an episode where most of it is like, it's okay, but it's not great. And then you have like this great stuff. Like, it's hard to say that this was a bad episode because it had some of the best stuff in it. Again, almost no problems with blocking anywhere in this episode. I can't think of any point where I was like, oh, the blocking. Oh, wait, the Katara throwing jet thing wasn't the greatest, but I think they did that because it would have been really expensive to have the water effect again. And I wish they had a better conclusion to the Badgermoles. So with the exception of Zuko going to save Iroh and Katara and Sokka going to save Aang, there really wasn't much in the way of forward-moving plot. Like, this was a static plot. Someone gets captured, Aang, Iroh, and they have to go and rescue them. It's mostly about revealing information. And other than that, we have revelations about what happened to Bumi, which is a reflection of the world and perhaps the effect that knowing the Avatar is back can have. It can, my friend is back, so there's the light in the darkness. And the revelation about what happened between Iroh and Zuko. How did they come together? How did Zuko change Iroh? And what exactly is Iroh's intentions in being with Zuko? So, like, how did they first, maybe, I don't even know if they're trying to imply that Zuko and Iroh had a special relationship before the funeral. I think that was like, this is the beginning of their closer relationship, which I love. And then, of course, why is Iroh with Zuko now? It's because of that. And we had a great new scene with the Earthbender soldier and his conversations with Iroh. So anyway, I'm gonna say it one more time. The Zuko Iroh flashbacks were perfection. They were so good. But anyway, I gotta hustle now to my next episode review because if I don't, I'm not gonna get these done before season 2 comes out. So please like, subscribe, and comment, even if it's just with an emoji, or if you're feeling super generous, check out my Patreon, Ko-fi, or hit the money heart thanks button down below. That's it, bye!